Focus. Okay, hello there friends, welcome back to Max Answers Writing Advice Questions. We only have a few weeks before NaNoWriMo is here, National Novel Writing Month, and I'm answering a bunch of writing advice questions sent to me by viewers like you. If you have questions that you would like me to answer, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and I'm going to answer a bunch of them over the course of this month. And yes, I'm going to be doing an enormous writing advice answer-a-thon at the end of October to wrap up all of the questions that I've been getting recently. So, without any more beating around the bush, I'm going to give you, as always, the formal disclaimer and remind you that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel, instead take it as the ramblings of a silly person like me. So again, really quickly, in case you don't know the format, I'm going to be answering around 3 to 4 questions depending on length. And I'm going to be answering them out of a random number generator because, again, no bias. I just put them all in a big list, in a big table, and I'm just rolling dice to see which one I get. Aside from that, I am going to be giving myself a little bit of a soft timer because I have been known to ramble. And last year when I did this, I had videos that were like 40 minutes long, and you don't need that, I don't need that. I can be more concise, I promise. Maybe. Anyhow, without any more beating around the bush, let's just roll the dice and see what our first question of today happens to be. Rolling. 5, numero 5. Best perfect question, short and simple. Any advice on naming characters? Now, you may be asking yourselves, Max, why are you smiling? Why do you look so silly all of a sudden? Well, because when I first began the blog, like 4 years ago, literally within the first month or so, I answered this question like 3 different times, and I literally got all of my thoughts about naming characters in one huge go. So, really quickly, let me just turn on my timer, and I'm pretty sure I can retell my entire advice from memory. Tips for naming characters, numero 1. Number 1. Please, I would like to urge you to stay away from naming your characters with meanings that happen to match the particular plotline or story. You can do it if you want, it's entirely okay. I particularly, for myself, I'm also a writer, so I can see these things coming from a mile away, but whenever I see a character named Cain, I am pretty sure, 99% sure they're gonna betray somebody. Again, I know that it may seem a little bit silly, and you can name your characters whatever you want. I would personally recommend that you stay away from names that are like almost spoilers to what they're going to be doing, and I think Cain is like the best example of that because that keeps happening, and it's been happening forever, and I see that all over fiction and video games, and it's gotten a little old, I'm not gonna lie to you, but whatever you do, my big advice, number 1, don't have spoilers within the name meanings. Number 2, I would recommend you, kindly, dearly, stay away from having characters that are named, that have the same first set of syllables. I don't know if you know how the human brain works, but when we're reading, we're not actually reading the works, we're doing we're doing mental arithmetic to kind of predict what the writing in front of us has, and basically shortcut our way through what we're actually reading. And it can be really confusing when you have characters that have the same first set of letters. Like, I remember reading this book that had this huge problem where, like, you had 3 antagonists, and they all had names that began with A-L-E. And it's like, this is so confusing, especially because they're all antagonists and they all have really, really similar names. Now, my timer is pretty much about to go off, and there's one thing that I want to say, and I may do a huge video on this later, but there is one lesson that I took from game design and I brought it into writing, and I'm not going to go super deeply into it, I'm just going to explain it relatively simply. In video games, such as Team Fortress 2, League of Legends, games with characters that people are playing all the time, in competitive nature, of course, designers design the way the character looks like so their silhouette is recognizable. Why? Because when you're playing a game, especially a competitive game like those, you don't stop to look at the character, your brain does a little bit of quick, short arithmetic to imagine who they are by their outline, such as in TF2, if you see a big, bulky man, that's the heavy, of course, because that's the way his outline looks like. And I took that to naming. I like to look at my names and actually block them out on Photoshop to see what they look like, what their silhouette looks like. And I try, to the best of my ability, to make sure that their silhouettes don't look all the same. I know it's a little bit silly, it's a little bit too much work, I get that, but it's nice to stop and acknowledge that your reader's brain is doing mental arithmetic to shortcut the reading process, and you don't want confusion. You want to be clear and concise. So once again, really quickly, because I went really long on this question, tip number 1, stay away from names that mean things that are directly connected to the plot. Number 2, please keep in mind having characters who are all basically not named the same, but they have the same first syllables in their name. That can create a lot of confusion. And finally, consider the outline of your character's name, because remember that your reader is not reading the name every time. They memorize it, create a mental picture of what the name looks like, and do mental shortcuts along the way. So, stay away from confusion. Make it as clear as them as possible so there are no confusion in the story later on. And with that one done and out of the way, let's go into the next question. I'm going to make sure that the file is correct, the number of one less question in the pool, and then the random number generator is going to give me a number, and it's 6. Question numero 6. Oh yes, this question. Oh man. How much planning is enough for a National Novel Writing Month, particularly when it comes to characters and the world? I am not too worried about the events, as I feel they sort of just take place on their own, based off of the character's actions. Points for you. But how do I know when a character is developed enough? And the world, I think I cut that out when I pasted the question, but also, how do you know when the character is fleshed out enough, or the world? In the planning process, how do you know when a character is developed enough? When do you know when the world is developed enough? When do you know that it is time to start diving into the story? These are all really silly questions. I have a very particular stance and point of view when it comes to planning and writing. And that's, of course, mostly because of the way that I write stories and the way that my stories unfold. I've come to realize over the years of writing many books that a lot of planning is good to give yourself a foundation of how your characters behave and how the world around them is. But too much planning, to me, in my opinion, can be a hindrance to the writing process. Why? Because much like real life, you're creating a mental image of these characters, these people who you haven't met already because you haven't been writing. Seriously, think about it. You spend hours upon hours creating the backstory for this character and adding all these facts and all these ideas and all these things that you think are part of who they are. And they may be, or they may not be. You don't know because you haven't written the character. In my personal experience, most of the time, generally all of the time, the original character sheet that I write for my characters, which by the way are really freaking short, even a third of a page, all of those usually get tossed out the window the instant I start writing. Why? Because the characters grow in front of me. The characters show me who they really are, and I never question it. Why? Because the characters are always right. Now, I know that makes me a little bit of a radical. I know that my particular point of view is different than most people's on this particular issue. There are people who stand by planning and people who say no planning at all. I think, and I touched on this, by the way, as well on my guide to how to plan a novel, which, look for it on my YouTube channel. It's a 2-part video series that I made a long time ago, and I should probably already remade because, my god, I looked awful in those videos. Anyhow, how do you know when you're ready to start writing? I'm going to tell you how I know, and it's really simple and straightforward. And the pros that I write books. I am ready to write about a character and a world when I have created a foundation to most of the big questions. The little questions, leave them aside. They will answer themselves in the course of writing. The big questions are what pretty much matters. Why is this character here? Who they are? What do they think about the world around them? And just foundation. Don't go and write enormous paragraphs defining exactly how they feel about everything. Just quick, short nitpicks. Just little words, little statements. Why? Because you're not really forming the character out of clay. You're literally just making a mold for them, which they're going to break when the story begins. Spoilers. So my timer went off screen. So allow me to combine my thoughts once again really quickly. This answer may not be the answer that you were looking for, primarily because you're asking me how I do things. I can't give you an objective answer for everybody because everybody writes differently. I want you to consider my point of view. I want you to consider what I told you, which boils down to come in, answer all the big questions you have about this character, and then walk into the story and don't hesitate, don't second guess yourself, and just write the story as it comes to you, truthfully and without hesitation. Writing is really weird, especially because everybody does it differently. Consider my point of view, consider the things you have been told in the past, and create something that works for you, exactly and specifically for you. I know that it may not be what you were looking for, but I want you to take this from this particular conversation, okay? Over time, you will develop your own way to do things. And the only way to develop those things is to write, and to write a lot, and to create a lot of stories, and to finish stories. So I want to inspire you to go out and start writing, jump in, see what happens, and see what works for you, and share it with the rest of us so we can maybe all together find a better way to go about doing things. Thank you for that question, and now for the next one. Final question for today's video, it's number 2. Número 2. Oh, I may actually have one more because this is actually a really quick one. Hi! I was just wondering what you thought about having both first-person narration and third-person narration in a story. So, this particular question is a very interesting one, and I think I've touched on that in the past. My stance is this, and I think it's smart for me to tackle it backwards. If you think that this is what your story needs, if you think that the only way to tell this story is to have 2 different points of view, good. Do what you need to do. Do what you need to do to make the story work for you. Simple as that. Simple and easy. If you think it works, if you think that's what you're looking for, what you need, do it. If you're not sure about that, I would like to, and I hate to be really blunt about this, I'm just going to come out and say it. If you think that having 2 different points of view that are basically not the polar opposite, but really different, makes a story special, it doesn't. People have done it in the past. Not very effectively, but people have done it in the past. Some people think it's really good. I have never particularly enjoyed it, but if you think it's what you need and what's gonna make the story work for you, do it. Again, I'm just sharing my opinion, simple as that. Like, people, I don't want you to take what I'm saying as objective and ultimate. It's just my opinion, subjective, and the opposite of ultimate, whatever that word may be. My thing is this, I am a sucker for format. I am a sucker for things following through on that format, and changing points of view within the story always throws me off. It really does, but that's just me though. Do I think it's wrong? Do I think it's right? I don't think there's wrong or right within the story. If it works, it works. Simple as that. I particularly have never been keen on it, primarily because, and I think I touched on this a long time ago, and it's good that I'm bringing it back up. I think that first-person narration stories are really good for personal stories, where you want to get inside of the head of one or a set of particular characters, show their points of view. I think a first-person narration is really powerful for a personal, intimate story. And third person is more effective when you have a larger scale sort of thing and story. You know, the fate of the world, the fate of the universe, war and peace, and many other big elements like that. I think it's more effective like that. But that's just the way I feel about it. Simple as that. It's the way that has come to work for me. As for you though, I don't know. But I want you to, if you think this is the way the story is going to work for you, try it out. Like, it's the only way things are going to work. And I'm going to just be the person who's going to come out and tell you this right now. If you write the story, and you finish the story, and during the act of revision you realize, hey, switching back and forth wasn't exactly as effective as I thought it would be, you can always change it. That is the magic of the first draft, and I want people to be empowered by the first draft because people think that it's a scary, terrifying thing, and it's not. The first draft is awesome. It's literally the funnest part of writing for me. You know why? Because you can do anything. You can do anything and nobody's going to see it. You can write it as badly as you need it to be and no one is going to see it. You know why? Because you're not going to share it until it's ready, until you have revised it. You're not going to share it even with your friends or your betas until you're certain of that story. You hold all the cards, all of the control to share the story when the time calls for it. Again, maybe that just makes me weird. But I think the first draft is like this super empowering moment because nobody's watching, nobody can see, and you can have this story be whatever it needs to be, as dirty as it needs to be, as scrappy as it needs to be. Why? Because it doesn't matter, because you're gonna revise it later. You should see some of my first drafts because they are full of misspellings, full of a lot of problems, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Why? Because I revised them into suitable stories, into stories that I can be proud of, and stories that I can show to my friends and my family and publish them. The first draft doesn't matter. And I think this question has devolved into talking about the first draft, but that's really how I feel about it. If you're planning to write for NaNoWriMo and you're terrified of the story being bad, first off, you haven't even finished the story. Don't worry about that. Secondly, know what? Nobody's going to see it because you're not going to share it with anybody until the story is ready, right? So, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but when I came to that realization years ago, I became I don't want to say giddy, but I was jumping around, realizing that all this time I'd been worrying about something that wasn't even a problem. There was this thing that I was terrified about, and was people finding my first draft and realizing, oh my god, this writing is awful, you shouldn't be a writer, you don't deserve to tell stories. And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm writing behind closed doors. The file is in my computer. I'm not sharing it with anybody, I'm not telling anybody about it, nobody can see it. I hold the control. I am the one who gets to choose, hey, now the story is ready to be seen by the world. And that realization really helped me. It made the writing process so much less daunting and scary, because I realized I don't have to get it right the first time. Because what is the first time? Nobody sees the first time. They're only going to see it when it's ready. And this question has literally become 2 questions, and this video, has it gone on long enough? It actually has, holy crap. In that case, I think I'm going to call it right here. I hope that these questions helped you, and I hope that if anything, I gave you a different point of view. Remember, as always, that if you have your own questions that you would like to send my way, leave them in the comments below or tweet at me at Mr. Kirin. But with all that silliness out of the way, I want to thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I'll be seeing you on the next one.